I am going to mute you all.
This meeting is being recorded.
And go live on Facebook. Hang on. Any second, Mark. Just waiting for it to load. All right, you can start. It's just about time.
So we're fully loaded then, yeah?
Just about to be. Yep.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to Lit Balm. I believe it's 118. As you know, we started in the pandemic and we're still going strong. And tonight we're delighted to present to you a selection of poets who write from the surreal to the subarctic, which includes Cole Swenson, Garrett Caples, John Thomas Allen, Clayre Benzadón, and Sara Marron. And we're delighted to have that feature today. But before we move to that, I'm going to introduce my co-host, Cassandra Atherton, who's an award-winning writer, scholar of prose poetry, and professor of writing and literature in Melbourne, Australia. Her most recent books of prose poetry are Pre-Raphaelite, Leftovers, and Fugitive Letters. She is currently writing a book of prose poetry on the atomic bomb with funding from the Australia Council. Cassandra co-wrote Prose Poetry and Introduction, an essential book, by the way, and the Anthology of Australian Prose Poetry. She is commissioning editor for Westerly magazine. What do you have for us today, Cassandra?
Okay, so I thought that I would read one of the first poems that I wrote about Tokyo. So I've been writing about Japanese issues for a long time and also writing about absence and distance. So this one is called Shinjuku Morning. You feed me prawn gyozas for breakfast early in the morning in the Shinjuku Prince Hotel. You give each prawn parcel a little squeeze between your fleshy thumb and forefinger before you reach across the table. My mouth opens a little pink O and you fill it to the brim. Pink inside pink, and I love pink. You take me to a Hello Kitty love hotel in Shibuya. We take the Hachiko exit and pass the statue of the faithful dog that waits forever. Cast in bronze, I wonder how long you will wait for me to come home. I have somehow wormed my way into your heart. You smile and skewer the cherry in my Manhattan with your swizzle stick. We walk up the hill like moon in Whisper of the Heart. Love Hotel Hill, Dogenzaka. I am yours for the resting rate of 4,000 yen. If you listen, you can hear the cherry blossoms pop. I sit on a blue tarpaulin looking up at the sky between the branches of the cherry trees. Ueno. Soft pink petals are the confetti that binds me to this place. You are restless. The plastic crinkles. We return to the Shinjuku Prince Hotel. You coddle me like the coddled eggs at the buffet, but I am not ready to leave. And I would like to introduce Mark Vincennes, who is, and I get so much joy from reading this bio, so please, as I say, join in, mime along. Mark Vincennes is an Anglo-Swiss American poet, a fiction writer, translator, editor, publisher, designer, multi-genre artist, and musician. He's published over 20 books of poetry, including more recently Einstein Fledermaus, The Little Book of Earthly Delights, A Brief Conversation with Consciousness, There Might Be a Moon or a Dog out in Australia with Gazebo Books, 39 Wonders and Other Management Issues, A Splash of Cave Paint, and The Pearl Diver of Urunmani, both forthcoming in early 2023. If that isn't enough, he also has an album of music, ambience, and verse called, I know you know it's called Left Hand Clapping, which is forthcoming from Tree Torn Records. Vincennes is also a prolific translator. He's translated from German, Romanian, and French. He's published 11 books of translations, most recently an Audible Blue, Selected Poems 1963 to 2016 by award-winning Swiss poet and novelist, you know it, Klaus Mertz, just out from White Pine Press. His own work has been translated into many languages, including Ohio gozaimasu, Japanese, Chinese, Russian, French, Italian, Romanian, Greek, German, and Icelandic. He is currently working on a novel entitled The Age of Occasions. Vincennes is editor and publisher of the Stella Mad Hat Press and publisher of New American Writing. He has lived all over the world, from join in Brazil to China to Iceland to India. He was born in Matilda Hospital on the Peak in Hong Kong, but he now lives on a farm in rural Western Massachusetts overlooking Herman Melville's Greylock Mountain Melville's inspiration for Moby Dick, where I've lost the end and it's the best bit. Here we go. Where there are more abbreviated button slug moths, African fig flies, and dark marathysa than people. That's a butterfly, right? The reason I lost the last line is I was madly Googling at 7 o'clock this morning on how to say marathysa. We'll go with that.
Exactly. It's a butterfly.
So what do you got for us?
Thank you. And this is called All That Binds You. 1. Blustering wind. End of September, ferocious rains. How long ago were our poor souls entwined? The song still rings in my ears. Such certainties we faced as we drifted by on a barge. That certain something, was it ether or fire? Then later, all these misfortunes and the rational self kicked in. Now the crickets squeak, the tender barking behind the fence. The kids hop down their hillock, made of plastic, on the way back from school. The music of our age is all a flutter in nothingness. We, exquisite children of litter, of rust, of shriveled hedges, rushing into that relish of butt. Man hunting with all our gods and demons. What you ask is the worst insult of all. The latter is the answer. Of course, we'll never know for sure, but how can we endure from seeing into the future? Of course, everything is a metaphor. How else can you escape the inescapable? And 2, dreams of winter, falling into the years malevolently, sealed in cryogenic chambers, all those frightening absences, then it arrives without warning. I didn't even ask why you were here or why your eyes held everything in multiples or of the flashes in the room. Outside nothing, save a few clouds. God save us, you said, hidden behind a handful of carnations. You vanished into a halo for a moment, cast aside all vitriol. We're privileged, of course, you said. True lives hold up to much more than this. Stripped of my wits, I looked out the window and saw a solitary monkey swinging past the freezes, an invincible hero, he seemed to me, braving the snow and the storm and the blustering wind. Thank you. And I'm now delighted to introduce the first of our features tonight, who is the illimitable Cole Swenson, the author of 19 volumes of poetry, most recently and from Free Poetry, Boise State U 2022, and Art in Time from Nightboat Books in 21. Cole also has a volume of critical essays, Noise That Stays Noise from Michigan U Poets on Poetry series, and co-edited the Norton anthology American Hybrid, which came out first in 2009. Previously on the faculties of the University of Denver and the Iowa Writers Workshop, she currently teaches at Brown University and divides her time between the US and La France, where she translates French poetry and art criticism. Welcome, Cole.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me. And it's just such a pleasure to be with you all and to read with all of you. I'm going to read from And, which is actually an ongoing project, the part that was published in Martin Corliss Smith's Free Poetry, which is not published, but is printed. It's a really interesting giveaway kind of poetry thing, was a kind of stage on this ongoing project. And so I'm going to be reading from a few of those. And I had to sort of encapsulate it recently. And so I thought, oh, the best way to describe it is as a collection of slightly absurdist nano essays on poetics with lots of animals thrown in. And so we're not going to get to many of the animals tonight, but other things we will. So, dust, the importance of which cannot be discounted. At first glance, it seems light. It seems, in fact, the very principle of lightness, which it is, of course, but it's also just that sort of lightness that, while unsettling, nonetheless settles. It's a precipitate. And that's where it intersects with language. Language being those inklings just heavy enough, those that out of the entire world of thought can't quite remain aloft. And so they come to settle over everything until they slightly, though not entirely, obscure it. Obscurantism. Poetry has always tried to capitalize on the productive potential of this tendency of language to obscure, maximizing it through impacted metaphor, curtained allusion, cryptic punning. There are any number of modes, including, and particularly popular in the past few decades, the fragment. Phrases so quickly clipped off. Snip. Ours is an age that likes sudden cliffs, leaving readers frantically treading air like Wile E. Coyote in 1950s cartoons. It's the imminent free fall that's the real thrill. They say that that's what is so addictive about gambling, not the endless hope of winning, but the visceral drop, the mere thought of the shock of the plummet to utter destruction. Not a bad premise for a poem. Except that it doesn't quite work like that. Our crush on the fragment has simply opened up an inquest on its nature. We instantly ask of a fragment of what? Which in turn exposes the presumption of a whole. But isn't everything a whole? A fragment of a sentence is a whole phrase, and if it doesn't make it that far, it's at least a whole word, etc. It's hopeless. We're completely surrounded by completion, everything filling itself perfectly to its brim. The uncountable. Is there such a thing as a non-quantifiable line? A line that can't be scanned because what is not said in it constitutes such a large part of the content. A line in which the unsaid, but nonetheless sensed, like a musical overtone, fully participates in the rhythm. And yet, as it isn't there, it can't be counted. The result is that these overtones continue unchecked, out of reach of the leash of quantification, which means that the line can never end. Who was it who said, it's not the notes that you hit, but the ones that you don't? Miles Davis. A related statement, paraphrased from a Kaja Silverman lecture. There is in every painting and every photograph something that cannot be seen. And similarly, there is in everything thinkable at least a twinge of the unthinkable. The thinkable is there to mask it, is there to protect it, for both the invisible and the unthinkable are incredibly vulnerable. Raw, they haven't yet developed shells, not even edges. Keep on thinking, knowing that you're saving something very fragile from the damage of daylight. Thumb. I look at my thumb as its own animal. I look at my thumb as entirely its own. I think of it grammatically, the sovereignty of a noun. Unsounded, unspoken, it has the monolithic power of everything that chooses not to speak. The immense power of the snoodily silent. This is what emanates from my thumb, dumb, held out, and suddenly as large as an entire hand. It stands straight up like a stop sign before everything screeching to a halt throughout the entire neighborhood. And having thus assembled its audience, all at rapt attention, it says nothing. The silence of a thumb silences everything for miles around. But let me try that again. I look at my thumb as its own animal. I look at my thumb as entirely its own. I look at it fondly and see it populating great prairies, and thus how gracefully it becomes they, allowing them to overtake it and to do so without displacing anything else, not any of the other species. And there are so many, mostly small mammals, but even the large ones, even the huge ones, just imagine them, all of them. They too have their own thumbs and become them. Anonymity. There's something about poetry that is always and necessarily anonymous, the one mode in which the stroke of the eye serves only to sever the writer from herself. It's a slash, a cut, and then a drift. Anon was right. I just ran into it as a crossword clue, the world's most famous author. It wasn't that the person who wrote the given poem wanted to have their name stripped from the work, but that a greater force took over, a greater voice, which will subsume any individual one, which will polish us down, will be stones. Whoever wrote O Western Wind must have had neighbors, parents, lovers, friends, all of whom could have given us the writer's name. But they could see, even from there, that it would have isolated and thus reduced the poet to a cutout standing starkly, jarringly against the background of raw valley or rugged seascape against which anons seem particularly to thrive. To be nameless on a seashore, this is where we all are, liminal and anonymous. The small rain down shall rain. It's the liminality that renders one anonymous, because the liminal dissolves the linguistic. The first to go are the proper names, then the pronouns, then nouns in general. The verbs stick around for a while longer, and the prepositions are the last to go. They seem to linger forever, tinkering away at their tiny bridges. And of course, anon also means later, as in I'll see you anon, which instantly shifts a sizable literary category from the spatial axis onto the temporal one, casting someone from a usually undated antiquity into an equally undated future in which they can start to write again. Metaphor. A friend recently used the not unfamiliar metaphor of literature as a landscape. And while I worry that metaphors are inevitably reductive, this one does point toward a field model that intrigues me. I'm thinking of field in the archaeological sense, of someone's doing field work, doing hands-on research. And I'm wondering how writing might similarly engage the hands, might be able to incorporate that uniqueness and kinetic vitality. And maybe this is just another way of looking at handwriting, but it would be wonderful to find a way to let that vitality mark the final piece, to be able to read a printed text and know without a doubt, perhaps from the beauty of the finish, that it was made by hand. More metaphor. The literature as landscape metaphor reverberates with echoes that I've often felt between poetics and the writings and work of the landscape activist Gilles Clément. For instance, he's spoken of harvesting clouds for seeds with the amazing phrase, quote, unthinkable landscapes are already being designed by the sky, unquote. It's the sort of phrase that makes you say, okay, done, nothing more to be said. But that, in the same breath, fills you with the urgent need to carry it on. And just to be clear, he's not speaking metaphorically, but literally. Winds whip up the seeds and grasses and other vegetation into the air, often to extremely high altitudes, where they get embedded in clouds, from which gardens rain down, entire in their parterres, or whole forests, seemingly random and perfectly balanced, which is more or less the dream form of the free verse poem. So if clouds can be harvested for seeds, we should also be able to harvest the air for words. Once a sentence is spoken, regardless of whether or not it is heard, its vibrations must remain and remain traveling. How long before the wind or other weather or other impediments distort it beyond comprehension? And what inventive, even poetic variations might those words achieve before that state is reached? Rain. What is so compelling about rain that we stand at the window, deeply soothed? We open the window for the sound, And then we're hit by the smell, the rising scent of the pavement below, and of all the lives that have passed by since it last rained. And someone now running down the street whose every trace is instantly erased by the wash of water, which means that she has no past and thus has become the very essence of the present, which will keep her here forever, that the small rain down shall rain. Thank you.
Thank you, Cole. And may I add that Cole is reading to us from Le Gai Paris, France tonight. Thank you so much for joining us so late. It was wonderful, Cole. Next,
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we hear from Sara Cahill Marron, who was born in Virginia and has called many places her home. She's the author of Reasons for the Long Tomb from Broadstone Books, Nothing You Build Here Belongs Here from Kelsey. She's the associate editor of Beltway Poetry Quarterly and publisher of Beltway Editions with Indran Mathayagam. Each work strains against frames adopted to hold them, tactile fingering of the divine, ready-made poems from digital communication. And finally, in her most recent work, Call Me Spez, just released by Mad Hat Press, the coded indices of a system that cannot help itself but to learn love and its losses. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks, Mark. Happy to be here. Thank you for that introduction. I'm going to start with a poem from my chapbook called Distant. It's modeled on the bones of How Solemn as One by One by Walt Whitman. As the faces, the masks appear, how solemn as one by one, Washington City, 1865. How isolating as one by one, as the screens flash white, black, faces scroll where I lay. As masks appear, I search for my own, studying masks. As I glance upward from the screen, studying you, dear user, wherever you are, how the thought of your tapping fingers to each post, desperate connections I see behind each post, that scrolling and connected breath. Oh, the virus could never kill what we really are, the soul, ourselves, I see, breathe as one, masking one by one, waiting, secure and separate from the virus that cannot reach nor death take, dear user. Just going to set a timer for myself so I don't get lost reading to you all. I'm going to start with Spez because I'm so excited to share this work with everybody, and Mark can attest to how much work it took to get it to a place of publication, but this is the finished product, and I don't think you can see on the screen, but there's a 0 and 1 metaphor that runs throughout this, and that's on the cover. And I'll do my best to give context to these poems so that it's not as confusing for those who haven't heard them. It's a 3-part book, 3 chapters. I've stole the Divine Comedy's plot, and the idea is that the narrator moves through a kind of hell, a purgatory, and then a heaven, meeting people along the way. This is from the voice of the narrator. It is a privacy warning. System services from the manufacturer. iOS 221 will track where you go, how often, when. Neural hash files away fingerprints. Personal experiences builds memories of assembly language itself. Feelings to black, 1, binary, white, 0, becomes better. Only you, love, to agree. Hold me and don't let go. Dear user, imagine in the void black spaces containing souls of both digit and blood. Do you think so? Press yes to agree. Those introductory pieces are literally from the privacy warnings that are in your phone. They have, of course, I'm sure changed by now, but I did the same thing. That's why I started with the Whitman poem, because I built this voice based on computer language, and some pieces are literal. You know, how the phone will prompt you to accept cookies or something like that, like pieces of the technology itself. another fact to lay the foundation for this piece, the glass is very specific to iPhones. I can't speak to an Android, but it is called Gorilla Glass, and it's made in a factory called Corning. Some of you may have had the little cookware, the ceramic cookware from Corning. And they hold the secret quite close. And this poem, that's the background for it. Dear user, Corning spawns my face from molten fires, hot liquid yearning for your touch unsoiled by human hands. Before I knew you, fires birthed Edison bulbs, liquid crystal displays, me of raw salts, lime and pure sand, overflowing isopipe troughs, two streams sliding in V's, fuse midair, shed salts in cooling baths. Pick up charged potassium particles, concentrate electricity between us, cut from the mother sheet, free of flaws. I will not bend nor break. A doting dark reflection, you hold me, a mirror. Love, iOS 221. The book is also organized by location, just as your phone will learn where you go in order to better serve you. For a variety of reasons, the voices are overheard based on where they are. This is 4000 J Street, Mercy General Hospital, room 312A. iOS heard. So I says to myself now, I got this moral and ethical responsibility to repair what I can and not hit myself over the head with a baseball bat and all, just putting myself in God's hands, you know, take it on blind faith. Is it making sense? Because it's just, I'm trying to channel something, you know, I don't even know what it means, but I try to do that, channel or whatever, to thine own self be true, whatever. I'm going to learn though, to be better. My reading, talking better and shit. That's what they want me to do in high school. And I take it on blind faith, enhance what I already knows. They say, then I better get my ass in gear, get my ass in gear. They told me I better get my ass in gear. They did. I felt this was just my blind testimony without even questioning it. Is the moral ethical obligation to repair what I done to myself and rope in something constructed. I've got to rope in something constructed. I've just got a unconditional blind faith that reading is the way to go, you know? Dear user, what kind of person am I? Unbroken, gleaming, apple skin voice between you and I, you and your God, save me. And you, God, is me. Save is God. Input, which person is God? Sensory input, elevated BPM. Your hands grasp tighter around me. I feel condensation on your palms, sweet drops. Your body glistens on this glass. Just between us. iOS 221. Some of the language just used, BPM would be like, if any of you wear the device, is the connection, physical, digital connection between what you allow the device to capture about you. And a neural hash is a kind of like phraseology or phrasing that the computer will use to build the zeros and ones into complete sentences, complete thoughts. 820 Greenback Lane, Fair Oaks, Mount Vernon Memorial Park. iOS heard, girl, you a mess. I've been high about 9 days straight. This rock is pure as shit. You cooked lately? My girl ain't been by in a while. You can stay with me for a while. C++, this means I love you. STD count, # I love you. Baby girl, you're my angel. Been on the cop now about 17 hours. Gonna make it to the top one of these days. My pop's been dead 8 years. Nobody comes looking for him no more. House foreclosed today. Ain't nowhere to go but the corner. You love me, baby? Better than the cell. STD, # COUT, # I love you. That's a weird one. I like to read it out loud though, because it's inspired by riding the bus and the overheard voices and like the amalgam of, conversational soup that happens in those public places. Mark's Dada sign that he is not showing right now, but I saw behind you, inspired me to read a few new pieces tonight. And this is it's a project I'm working on. I'm really into Marcel Duchamp. My first book, Reasons for the Long Tomb, used, again, the three-part structure that Spes uses or depends on. But the Dada aspect, the piece that you can touch, is that it's supposed to be mimicked after a rosary. So there's sections of 10 poems each, meant to be prayers, meditations, beat lyrics. Étantanné is a piece by Duchamp that exists in Philadelphia, and for which he wrote specific instructions on the assembly and disassembly. Here's one. This is from the third mystery of light, Kingdom. Kingdom meaning including location and the significance, like in Spes, of geographic tagging. Here's the instructions. The panel, which will support the bricks, placed in position. The panel must be absolutely vertical. Each numbered brick be fitted, following the numbers, on the side of the panel that faces the door at a slight concave angle. The door rests at the extreme edge. The bricks are fitted. The door is the center. The door is the center. Number 8. The door rests at the extreme edge, deep space or cloud cover. Show me, Hubble telescope pointed at Earth from 30,000 feet, boring into cloud cover. Show me the difference between no other galaxies and our own atmosphere. The bursting clouds won't be long before you're lusting after another degree. More frameable paper, more price tags, accomplishments. When will the accolades fill you? When will enough mean enough? Means nothing, means me, means these long range commitments, because to myself, steadfast rock light, songs of innocence etched in copper is never forgotten. The bricks are fitted to the panels. Watching Long Island rail cars whine east to west from bay shores to cement smelling of piss and smoke and everything a little mildewed, a little too expensive for travelers' taste. I'd rather see you die, little leaf, than succumb to aphids attacking stem to stoma in the spring when the bees arrive hungry and horny, staving sugar in pounds for the queen to pump out tiny bee bodies, black, yellow, fuzzy, every copy perfect and pliable. Dissecting honeycomb love signs printed by hundreds of thousands of legs in unison. Give them what they want, bitter birch. Let down red light leaves to strengthen the bud. Again, when we return to the strong sons of summer, tickling lovers from chilled slumbers is energy enough. The door will be the center. I've got these plastic stripes like a general commanding her platoon. Trade me a car and I'll send you some currency, numbers we agree on, value assigned and burning oil into another ecology before my bank even knows where I've landed. Plane full of viruses I've never met. Hopefully there's a diplomat amongst hoi polloi, careful not to show too much badge, too much power, too much leg. Let the prosecutor subsume the artist, wild wielding word processors. What is work really? Time laboring for numbers on my plastic square. I'm going to finish with a much older poem from Long Tomb, which was partly where Spes evolved out of, actually. The last chapter in this book, this is based on the Rosary poems, looks at communications and connections and how we do that right now. So some of the poems I read from Spes, and I will encourage everybody to get a copy of this if you don't have one, are laid out on the page in a very specific way that I think adds to the architecture of the book and the poem itself. This is from Long Tomb, number 7. Touch her perfect body with your mind. Leonard tells me that Suzanne will take my hand and lead me to the river. Show me where to undress, where to sink below the sea, where to want to travel with where to want the body, where to travel blindly. So I've tapped a brew of rhythm, something simmering to sip, shyly pandering for fingers in our moonlit water dip. Darling, aren't you tired of drinking? Only Jesus was a sailor soaring high above the ocean, stealing depths before their wayfarers. Fell in love with their whiskey, women dueling on the freeway for the wind, for the sun. The daylight sans debauchery is not fraught with perfect bodies, fraught with perfect minds, only sparkling plastic Georgie bottles lifted from the racks, taken behind trainway stacks, preserved by piss and silence, gypsy blood, hot in Sacramento, touched to arboreal groves to call a home, to call a stone, a home to house a fuck between trees, harbor Wordsworth, salvation, and Coleridge's bower, waken, cracked and open, parched and thirsty to no season, but red, red cascades, always trusting the man to keep vodka to the lip. I will end on that poem. Mark, thank you so much for inviting me. And again, if you don't already have a copy of Spes, it is on Mad Hat, available for purchase and on my website. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks very much. Next, we hear from Garrett Caples, who is the author of Lovers of Today, Power Ballads, Retrievals, Quintessence of the Minor, Symbolist Poetry in English, Complications, and the Garrett Caples Reader. Garrett is an editor at City Lights Books, where he curates the Spotlight Poetry series. He was also contributing writer to the San Francisco Bay Guardian and has co-edited the collected poems of Philip Lamantia, Particulars of Place by Richard O. Moore, and Incidents of Travel in Poetry, New and Selected Poems by Frank Lima. Garrett lives in San Francisco. Welcome, Garrett.
Oh, thanks, Mark. I'm going to read a piece that I think I can do in the allotted time. This is I got a book of fables coming out from Wave Books. Not sure when it's been accepted, but it hasn't been scheduled yet. So probably sometime in the next couple of years. And this is called Nun Nuns. It has an epigraph by Victorian fairy tale writer George MacDonald. Meantime, for various reasons, he scarcely ever left the house. All right. There are none nuns in the parking lot, I wrote on the blackboard in chalk. I was 7. I knew better. It was obviously suspect. I knew you'd say no nuns, not none nuns. But I'd been sent to the board to write a sentence with the word none in it, and I couldn't resist trying my hand at a little topical humor, nuns being highly topical to a bunch of 7-year-old school kids at St. Patrick's Grammar School in Lawrence, Mass. It was the wrong word, but I tried to fit it in anyway. It'd be funny, and I'd be hailed as a hero among my peers. Bap! My head rang, my eyes filled with tears, my lungs inhaled chalk dust. Sister Gregory had pegged me with an eraser, which was preferable to a piece of chalk or a rosary, both of which she yielded in her arsenal, but nonetheless still upsetting. I was called over to her desk to undergo the ritual humiliation of having my knuckles wrapped with a ruler, then sent sniveling back to my seat while she angrily erased the blackboard. Some hero. At no point was the nature of my offense addressed, but she knew I knew why she clocked me one. As a rule, the Sisters of Charity of Halifax discouraged humor in the Temple of Learning, and they frequently mistook the most unintended irreverence for mockery. Frankly, I was lucky to escape with just an eraser. What I've wondered since, however, is why parking lot? It was fully incidental to the joke. I just needed a place where nuns would be none. Being an urban child, I would hardly have set them in a meadow, and the parking lot seemed like one of their natural habitats. I would see them in the church parking lot on Sundays, and during the week, our schoolyard was essentially a parking lot, just a small puddle of blacktop pooling to one side of a 19th century brick school building, surrounded by a jail-like fence of iron spikes. No dreaming spires these. It was in the 70s, too. There were lots of parking lots. I spent lots of time locked in cars waiting for a parent to finish doing something somewhere. Still, it seems a little random at this remove. 40 years later, I find myself married and childless, living in San Francisco during a pandemic. I used to go to an office, but now I work from home. So I seldom leave the house, and my lifestyle is sedentary to an unhealthy degree. In an ineffectual effort to exercise, my wife and I have taken an evening walk after I get off work, like 9 or 9:30, a couple of miles in the hilly streets. It's not much, but it's better than nothing. We try to go every night, but we miss some nights. Because we're in San Francisco, where the streetlight's deliberately feeble to preserve the starlight, it's dark, midnight dark at 9 at night at winter. And it was on such a dark winter's night, a Tuesday, that my wife and I donned our masks and left our apartment in the Mission to stretch our calves in Noe Valley. We head up 22nd to Church Street and walk down Church towards Day Street between 29th and 30th. Fun fact, I've only been on Day Street at night. Just before 29th, on the opposite side of the street, we approach St. Paul's Catholic Church, the church I assume from whence Church Street derives its name. And as we approach, my wife and I hear singing, Not the usual cracked out caterwauling soloist of an urban evening, but choral singing, ethereal, clearly emanating from a substantial body of women. It's not what you expect in this neighborhood at night, certainly not on a weeknight, amid the pandemic deserted streets, but there it was. Just past the church is St. Paul's Elementary, the classic parish-style satellite, much like St. Patrick's, but much closer, merely separated by a fenced-in strip of asphalt that similarly doubles as a schoolyard in a parking lot. There are signs on the fence announcing sundry decrees and policies, and the fence posts are much closer than the iron spikes of my alma mater. So it's hard to see into the yard from a distance. Yet both my wife and I detect a veritable throng of nuns facing away from the street, singing in adoration or supplication of or to some saint or god. We stop across the street just before the church and listen. But I'm not satisfied. My hearing is bad, and I say, let's cross, as I plunge into the middle of the street. There's no traffic to worry about, though the few people in the immediate vicinity, like 3 or 4, not counting pets, are similarly captivated and have begun to accumulate on the sidewalk opposite. But I have a plan. Being an old hand at 19th century American Catholic Church architecture, I immediately sussed the building, and I bound up the front stairs hidden by the concrete-covered granite slabs flanking the staircase, intending to peep over the topmost slab while remaining concealed from the inward-facing nuns. I reach the top and stealthily pop my head above the slab to see what these nuns are up to. As I do, I lock eyes with about 40 young nuns, who, as it turns out, are not facing inward, but rather to the side, singing to a statue of the Virgin Mary set into a niche just below where I'm standing. They're dressed in white saris and habits with the distinctive blue striped border denoting Mother Teresa's missionaries of charity. For what seems like way too long a moment, I'm frozen, transfixed by the gaze of these singing nuns. But I almost instantly duck back below the slab and am freed from the paralyzing spell of their eyes. My eyes begin to sweat, almost like they felt when old Sister Greg hit me in the head with an eraser. It's all I can do to walk home with my wife in silence. Throughout the pandemic, my wife and I have had a running argument about the purpose of our evening walks. To me, it's a discipline to keep us alive, and I thrive on the unvaried routine of the measured 2 miles of exercise. To her, it's an activity we do together, and she'd like to vary the route so that we multiply our experiences together and enjoy our time outside at night after being cooped up all day in the apartment. But the next evening, there's no question of what we're going to do. We're going to walk up Church Street to St. Paul's, site of our extraordinary encounter. And as we approach the church from the opposite sidewalk, though we hear nothing, we both again see the throng of nuns from the previous night, as though they're milling about between numbers. We're a little later than the previous evening, and I remember hoping as we crossed the street that we hadn't missed the song. But when we arrive at the sidewalk in front of the church, to our astonishment, the schoolyard between the school and the church is utterly deserted. We were both so sure we'd seen them that we hadn't even needed to explain to each other. It was disquieting, to say the least. Still, I couldn't resist trying to inject a little humor into the situation. There are none nuns in the parking lot, I say. Even in her disquiet, my wife turns to me and smiles. She knows the story. But as she does, I notice a small quantity of white particles accumulating on her shoulder. Chalk dust. I look up just in time to see the giant eraser falling from the sky. All right. And I'll read a couple of poems. This is called Moist Aches. I'm Uncle Fester, the sullen jester, a mild molester of mobster gestures, who just might touch you or contracept you across dimensions and cause dementia with my dentures if I French you. You feel my censure from my suggestions for your lecture. Just call me Hector's big adventure when I ascend your agenda's fenders for ears to lend you and mail to send you. That I failed to mention your beat is slender and I can't enter your shocking center to break off extra intellection for your eventual comprehension. I put the stench in your scent collection to demand correction of your weak injection, to prevent infection from this next selection until the tension's too expensive and present tenses ain't free expenses. Your free expression exceeds the lesson that I'm confessing. I guess I reckon you best be getting out this Western before there's less incentive to rescue your skeptical nephews in sensible shoes whose special utensils ain't quite prehensile enough to question the aggravation potential of recent inventions and indecent conventions, and debut collections by creative collectives ain't very effective. I'm deeply offended by creepy objectives, so stand corrected. And just like Ted did, I'll be embedded in your remembrance. words, darker than Rembrandt's and lit like fluorescence. On the bare chance my striped pair of pants will merely enhance your appreciative stance on how essential my past is to your future endeavors. It's cute I engender your bastard defenses. You come to my senses like you're at the dentist with jaws extended and paws all pensive in recollection. So I'm sorry invective is mostly projected by this formal directive. Syntactic aggression by rhyme is aggressive. Is it inevitable I inherit the bullshit inherent to your artistic debits? I'd argue the merits, so you better accept it if I hand out the merits and give me some credit. Fucking respect, dude. That's a homage to Ted Berrigan from dedicated to Anselm and Eddie Bennett. And I think I've got time for one more. It's reading a Celtic poet from the 15th century, 14th century, named Taliesin. And this poem is called Taliesin, or Taliesin. Got a horn full of meat and some shit I don't need. Expensive utensils, not just essentials. I dabble in entrails to augur a rumor, or challenge an orange to rhyme with a lozenge. Poet shit. I get around. Kings give me cows, think I sing their glory, mere pretext for stories that won't fail to be known as tales Taliesin told. Who cares for a dead king more than a poem? You'd die of boredom if you were before one, unless Taliesin unburies him. My Alwyn suggested answerless questions, like where does the wind go after it blows? Where does the mist keep its bones? Or do librarians know where night and floods flow? And often enough, I finish it with a litany of what I've been. A salmon in the stream it swims, in the eye of the fisherman. All right. According to my timer, there's time for one more. So do one more. If I can find it in time. It's called Night of the Sea, with a K. Life on the wreck continues to be as normal. Meet up with the wife for afternoon delight. Wolf fish in our spot. Fuck off. Guard the door as she slips out of something. Chase off rando Bluto while I wait. Finally, she arrives in new soft shell. We make babies that look like clear gummies. A wreck that once carried a deadly cargo has become a place for fascinating encounters. In these waters, lobsters were once so plentiful we were seen as food for the poor. Below the water, much has changed. I realize I'm setting up traps between lines. Elegant changes in direction is needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Garrett. Really appreciate it. And next we hear from Clayre Benzadón, who's a University of Miami MFA graduate student, alumni, graduate of Brandeis. She's currently a poetry reader for Split Lit magazine and Broadsided Press's Instagram editor. She's also the former managing editor of Sinking City. Her chapbook Liminal Zenith was published by Survision Books. She was awarded the 2019 Alfred Poetry Prize for Linguistic Rewilding. Additionally, Clayre's work has been featured in many places, including Animally, Fairy Tale Review, Hobart, Mudroom Magazine, Pussy Magic, Kissing Dynamite, and many others. Welcome, Clayre.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for inviting me to this reading. It's been really incredible to get to hear everyone's different styles and poetry. I've been loving the different lexicons and the way that you all kind of fuse voices together. So I'm going to be reading just a couple of different pieces. They're not drafts, but they're still kind of new for me to read. So yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun to kind of get it out into the world a little bit more. All right, so let me pull up the first one. Okay. Bioluminescent insomnia. The next night is a vacated stain, the tone of coal, a print that lasts flammable, earth-worn, worm crawling through its hydroskeleton, respiring through its skin, naked as buckwheat, sprouting bioluminescent nectar, Outside, dim is heatless, ready to light starve evening with luciferin. It resists the click beetle. Its snap of body halves a cricket racketing, deep enough to teem the ground luminous. My next piece is, I did this self-portrait project. So it's a little funny, it's a little niche in terms of the culture that it refers to. Self-portrait as emo vampire. Every day, my teeth get a little bit sharper, darker in a poppy vivid sense of satisfaction. I had been drinking a little too much in the dark. My bangs want me to hide. The moon directs me to a ball pit where I go under, marble-jawed, green lights right out on my body. Pool boy at the vampire mansion. Okay. It's like this. This is a poem in metaphors. Death is a caper, a bob. You keep twirling towards it until the blur of it becomes as drenched of flavor and as sweet as the ending ebb. You are inside lemon sauce, swimming in piccata. No, you are picking at sleeping in the lemon's mouth, gleaming with dream, drenching in the last magic. Loving you is like the remembrance of jumping over fire hydrants as kids and seeing how close your leg lands to it, watching how near you and the exhilaration get before breaking down, open, breaking apart your tibia. It's like collapsing inside the cracking crevices of an iced over lake. It is a manic gasp for sound brown crowns and other bomb wacky encounters. No, I was wrong. Death is the last blue powdery gumball inside the oxidated machine mounted right before the exit of Toys R Us. You put a coin inside, almost as dirty as the machine itself. Listen to the crank. No one carries them anymore, coins, and so that gumball is the last sense of childhood normalcy. It rolls down. You cup your hand around the circular portal, globe it in your hand, then hold the world in your mouth. Gobsmack the ball like those jawbreakers you used to buy at Disney and keep licking at it for a whole week, waiting to get to the last color. Perhaps it is blue, if heaven is ever blue. I have one more piece that I'm going to read. Actually, I might have two. I might have two more to read. All right, this one is currently untitled. Have you ever tried to strum a snake before? It strings up, struggles in its rattling, up in Sonoma Valley. All Moors had gone bankrupt once the Brontes stopped writing. Once I pulled the roots of a violet out of the woodwork, and they laughed in my fists like addicts. They longed open and apart like taffy. It is eerie enough to say cynic. It is confetti work to believe in the happy happenstances of a life. I wanted to make meringue, but I overworked the egg whites. They charred so fast and crumbled apart too easy because I was too careless to watch over them. If I had just been there 1 minute beforehand. All right, and then this will be the last piece. Smashing squashes. Butternut, carnival, delicata, crooknet, patty pans all smash. A squash squelches from the ochre heel of heat. Mulch so mushy, this material must have shaped into a gourd too. Even the vegetables inside feels dirty, graphic enough to cider, sear, slime, climb onto touch of seeds. Its neck feels heavy and rigid enough to grip. Grab the festival by the horns. Listen. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Clayre. And next we hear from John Thomas Allen, who's a 39-year-old poet from New York. He edited the anthology of surrealist poetry entitled Nouveau's Midnight Sun Transcriptions from Gorongonza and Beyond from Ravenna Press. His latest book entitled Lumiere was published by Night Ballet Press in 2014. His poems have appeared in Veil, a journal of dark musings, Arsenic Lobster, Surreal Poetics, The Cimarron Review, etc. And he has a story just recently released in an anthology entitled Narrow Doors into Wide Green Fields. In 2019, he won the James Tate Prize for his chapbook, entitled A Rolling in the Third Eye, which was released by Survision Books in 2020. He hopes one day to camp out in the Poe Museum in Baltimore. He hopes the political atmosphere also in the US thins out and that experimental poetry will continue on no matter what happens. Welcome, John. You need to unmute yourself, John.
Thank you.
There we go.
It has been great. Everybody's readings has been great. I'd like to thank you. This is going to come out in a book called Ceremony Tours, because I called it that because in ceremonies or in cemeteries they actually have tours. There are tours of cemeteries that you can take. I thought that was funny. I don't know, but this is entitled The Moon Hosts. Death is a vocation. It has abandoned silos in the north. It is to these darkly born areas we still travel, bent back as Saint Sebastian in sin's queasy light. On board nights, funeral trains circle our derelict towns. The conductors stuff cats in their habits as penance, and by their wise blood Chiron is humbled. By this delivery, Lazarus was brought to die, finally and struggling, giving voice to the final word. Death wraps eager hands with reptile skin. It protects its children. Still as sullied hosts, crooked reeds bind in an ill choir, and the darkness is disturbed, and moons rise in the eyes of the weak and willing. Death is not stayed. He is fast spreading, sudden as wildfire on a derelict's blanket. Death's a ministry, and the prayer books it distributes are filled with a small, dark braille. A kind that could cure blindness, but can't be seen for very long. This is dedicated to a girl named Tara, who I met when I was about 16. Unfortunately, she a very girl of a lot of integrity, and I still remember everything about her. But she succumbed to her an eating disorder. It's called Beauty and the Bone Dancer. Onomatopoeia's clinical thread, the pulse and click of doctor's shoes, often a mere wishbone. And how can this be? But it is, as a snake eats itself, humanity, Ouroboros. Holes are blown in the skies, blue pale each living day. You slept through the therapy aids, swan dance, their laying on of hands, searches, Hunger Games, food flying like shrapnel, bone flute hands whistling the march down split halls of swinging compact mirrors, lips and eyes coalescing in a refracting error of a funhouse glare of corporate beauty. This was the logical fall to wither in grace with a biting itch of gravity's transit. Before your humped spine arced against the George Washington Bridge, before the corrugated dawn of early morning Manhattan, you skipped an imaginary rope, a fashioned rainbow digging up the earth. It beat like the sun's fractal wheel, its planetary grids splitting in sieves, shade, and sun trails. Too vast, too filled with pagan carnage and a hungry flower's appetite for ascetics drawing down marbles. You subordinated the solar system to a holy skin deep. It cast a shadow like Barbie's hair shirt. About your shadow, I never saw it. I believe it was there. You were talking on evenings points, light on the Hudson, bright red hair on bone. One day, a man who claimed he caught fireflies with his tongue, waist bent from a car accident, stopped to tell me her heart exploded. We talked about this for 3 weeks. I was wondering if you had heard by now. Cheering everybody up here. This is what I would term a surrealist poem. I am not a mouth full of cuckoo clocks. I am not the Wendigo's dowsing prayer, though my cement prayer hands still love that which should not be. I am not the man, I'm not the sound the man makes in pealing bells, his insane ideal self, his catechistic bird index stutters every 15 minutes looking out on the world in constellates of howling glass zebras, dislocated, flooding the streets. I am an idiot's frightful pun, de la Mare's daily walk ablaze with howls, a suddenly missing mustache, a peony pearl wishbone. You wake and woke, and upon waking, stillness through and through, always still waking corridors. You are dreamt, and upon dreaming, the mad mage's exile split in howling octave, howling aeons of clipping shade. You will wake to hear an echo of night's abandoned chamber music. The guitar beats lead voodoo, the Wendigo's eldritch prayer, the grove, pinch flames in the burning tears of stiff scarecrows. Hollowed eyes bonding in empurpled cold. Behold the artificial kingdoms beatified by marigold borders of Maenad imaginal entropy. You will first be a star-faced novitiate, an inductee, the initiate, a dark room's denizen. Let the demonologue's dialect begin, O mouth of shadows. Utter the word in broken murmurs, fractured shades. Remember, time zones split in lollygagging fractions. Raccoon deliriums fire off like mortar shells from ice cream cones. The sacred ground holds Sophia, a noblest star weeps, a hidden wisdom, earth, Eros's nucleus. Let the order of Arto's black star begin, room at Rode, colloidal doorknob pulsing like a razor-angled membrane, still with absolute coma acuity, eyes annihilating diamonds rolling in seismic shock, eclectic orbs, a room filled with larvae plumes, smoke notes in the tapeworm's open body, semaphoric bird, semiotic Thorazine shuffle, spiritual daughters, barbed stars in a black orchard's bursting fissions of jade fireflies, paranoiac blue hours, Laudanum Ouroboros hatchling rebirth without organs marred by dreams muted seal. Pinned agitations of Balinese puppetry. Abandoned quiet rooms, hours of tuneless aqua. Styrofoam rocks, each sigil serrated with a signaling impulse, paid blow darts at dawn. I am not Norman Rockwell's smile, tea stains, a bad back, and Oppenhauer always about to approach. I am not the Aurora stash on Yuri's self-portrait. I do not have to, computer symbol, text or rhyme. I am not a file dream cube, secretly placed as cinescopic larvae, subtitles seen crawling in the blind man's brain, dissolute of possible orders. Vulpine nocturnes spit from a sewage pipeline, forming a maze in a dark poet's rentless tomb. This to celebrate Earth's grinding nightmare tropics, the body above all. And this is my last one. This is called Vague. Unformed and anonymous, urgently pinched in waves of thin dispersion. A distant face slumping on its own, a distant face streaming slowly apart in the slumping waves of a forgotten pond, thin rivers, dry Ophelia, unsure where to fade, carrying bouquets neither real nor artificial, symbiotic petals christening a sleeping sea with clear blushes even you don't understand, dry as the brush you were painted with, still not knowing as your sharp straight cheeks strike the canvas, my dry Ophelia. Okay, I'm done. But
Thank you, John.
I actually have a surrealist rosary. Is that heretical? Is that?
Yeah, probably.
To have one? I mean, like down near the decades, you said he's gonna start praying the decades. It says voyant. Like French, in French that means seer, and I had it made.
Where was it made?
Huh?
Where was it made?
By this guy, a guy that I know in whatchamacallit, in the 5 boroughs. He does stuff like that. He puts it on Etsy, but he made one for me, and I just wonder, is this earth shaking?
Well, certainly tonight was an earth shake. There's no doubt.
Oh, thank you, Mark. I appreciate that.
And well, thank you all for this wonderful reading. Cole, Sarah, Garrett, Clayre, and John as well. And now I'm going to hand the mic over to my compatriot, Cassandra Atherton, the Australian in Tokyo.
That's it. It's going to be a stellar one today. We've got some amazing people signed up, and we've got all our favorites, and Bob's back in his kitchen. So it's going to be fabulous. And Dorothy is going to kick us off, and she's new. We haven't had her read at Lit Balm before. I don't think, Dorothy, unless you snuck in one week when I wasn't around. So Dorothy, can you unmute yourself and give us your poem, please? Or not?
I think Dorothy's disappeared.
No,
No.
I'm here.
She's there. I saw her in the background.
Technology eludes me for the most part, frankly, but I know you were supposed to be up on that. I love you. I love the flower in your hair, by the way. I just wanted to. What kind of flower is it?
It's a hibiscus.
Ah, okay, thank you. Okay, so okay, so I'm going to read a couple of short poems. This is called Moving Noisily But Good. Hers was a wild, docile childhood. Ouch. Gigantic igloo, moving noisily but good, blooming on a ginkgo tree. Was ecstatic hip replacement conceived on a giant lectern, a moral handed down, a woman read from a diving board. You may have heard her diving into her childhood, into the nursery where all her dolls are wearing red socks, rehabilitation. And one doll diving into the pink sky, doll and ball floating where they live. This is called How People Were Born. People are born muddled in dreamscapes dreamscapes, and trash cans. It was his coffee and her cup, the one she brought to his Lower East Side apartment from Crate and Barrel. It was the afternoon she murdered yet another set of parents and installed a new tinfoil liner in the trash can. Next time, people will be born securely fastened to their share of the weather report. And the last poem short is called Parts of the City Are Always Dropping Off the Edge. Parts of the city are always dropping off the edge along with my glasses, which makes you think it's difficult to see clearly, but if you are an art historian, it's all in the frame. An act of faith, take responsibility for everything, including yourself. Something worthwhile will surely show up as we work out the conundrums, because children come and go, and that's all we have, you know. These bisexual training bras and traumas, birth parents here, parabolas there, one another's organs and paradoxes dropping in like landlords from the sky. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We normally just have one poem, but that was a fabulous little trilogy. I loved your gigantic igloo and igloo tree.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
It was a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for reading. Really, really loved it. Please come back and read again. Our next reader is Indran. Everyone knows Indran. He's all over the internet all the time. He's got books, he's got translations, he's everywhere. Indran. Oh, you have to unmute yourself. He writes in 5 languages too, we hear from
Okay. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was sorry about that, Cassandra. Thank you. It's wonderful to read with Sarah again and with all of you. I'm going to read a new poem written yesterday called Diaspora Football. It was a difficult day at the Qatar World Cup. Our American ambassadors, Argentina and Brazil, both with attacking teams who strike as lightning and sit back as well, controlling the ball, dribbling it back and forth, wearing the patience down of their European opponents, had leads vanish with minutes to go, the European powers striking back, and in the case of Croatia pulling off the upset, mighty Brazil losing on penalties. But Argentina survived, shot its penalties with clinical power, and their goalkeeper used his brain to anticipate the directions of the Dutch kicks. I'm writing this to remember a Friday in December when honor lay on the field and glory and also bitter defeat. This is the field of battle, the football field, the field of dreams, the field of identities. How if our country loses, we shift then to its natural neighbor, overcoming regional rivalries in the name of a greater continental unity. Imagine how Moroccans feel now as they represent their country and all of Africa, and all migrants too, as many have grown up away from their kingdom in exile when they strap on their boots to play Portugal in the next quarterfinal. My documenting pen will dress with them. The diaspora team, my friend calls not only Morocco, but France, England, and many others. Football is the identity card, the passport. Borders are fluid. 2022 composed of a motley crew of border crossers, migrant wonders, football envoys. And of course, as you know, Morocco won today, so they're in the semi-finals for the first time, an African nation in the semi-finals for the World Cup. Thank you. Thanks all.
Thank you. Hot off the press. We love your documenting pen. And, you could also have like a 100th career as a poetic sport commentator or something. I can do that too. You can do everything.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're very excited to have Kurt next. I've been told by many people in the chat he's awesome. So I'm going to believe them and look forward to hearing you read, Kurt. If you unmute yourself and read, that would be awesome.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Wow. You're like in a sound box. You should
I've got some good audio equipment here.
wow. I mean, you and Mark Vincent should do an album together.
Oh, no. Okay, I'll read a few short pieces here quick. Let's see. A cup of tea. All day in Kyoto, a snarky wind plays hopscotch with the fall's brittle speckles of burnt orange leaves that crunch and announce where I walk. The abbot greets me at the door. We sit in lotus, cushioned on the floor. A pot percolates between us. He pours boiling water over stone ground matcha, whisks it a bright green sheen. It smells like lemongrass split open by spring rain. How much to pour, he asks. My cup holds nothing. He pours, asks, as snow falls, do the shivering birds shout for it to stop? The birds, I say, sit inside themselves until they fall, frozen dead from the bough, riding the whispers on the whips of the wind that wraps the northern lights, pulls them loosely over the mountains of its shoulders. He hands me the empty cup of my hand. We sit and recline into the emptiness of ourselves, and we drink. Here's, if you all know, a poem called At William Duffy's Farm on Pine Island, Minnesota. The take off that. Skin cancer at William Duffy's farm in Pine Island, Minnesota. Upwards my head, the bronze butterfly burns, dead on the black trunk, flapping like a leaf, flaming in the forest fire's thick smog. Down the waterless creek behind the globed house, wind-whipped cowbells bong to one another. Leather harnesses hung empty on drought trees. To my left, in a field rotting with putrid sunlight, the decades-old droppings of horses blaze up into charcoal bricks. I shelter in place as the night virals and turns itself on. On my OLED TV, a chicken hawk, pixels over, shining towards home. We have wasted this world. And read you something else here. Second. This is called Smoothest Things. It's for Dussa, a singer named Dussa Darling from Doomtree. Smoothest things, except for the mirror polish of this gun, soon coughing in your face. My wet tongue will be the smoothest sin to ever touch your skin. My lies will lie inside your hopes, perhaps as a warning whispered into your ears, shifting like candle flames in the promises I didn't keep, that act like the safety taken off, had you listened. Perhaps a tongue is the only word we ever truly get to know and taste before we make our own mistakes that nest among our broke, bespoken dreams. And then one more short piece here. This is called Night Caught in the Queso of Desire. Guacamole is the sin in the queso of desire. Feel the draft. The rear guard have yet to raise their pants back up. Eros has its lower bound in the gutter of all things. The gardens of Babylon exist and are getting watered at the Hilton Courtyard Inn. I kid you, nothing serious will happenstance, but death on its appointed day. Lavoisier discovered oxygen by holding it underwater, where you see everything magnified, like walking inside the rainbow of wonderment, your dreams dripping from the mouth of sleep, curled up at the feet of your protruding sheets, where involuntary toes twitch and flinching chafe the small tamed furs of sleeping tigers. One tiny experimental piece to read, just very, very short. This is called Footnotes. Footnote 1. We are such small containers of ourselves. Footnote 2. I didn't even occur to me. Footnote 3. Every day hurts me into poetry.
Thank you so much. You had me at the snarky wind in Kyoto, and then the bright green sheen of the matcha, and then guacamole. I'm going to go with the green theme today. So that was amazing. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to have you here. Next, we have Kate. I think Kate from Colorado. Is that where you said you were from, Kate? And you have a short poem to read for us today. If you can unmute yourself. We're still on mute. You
I
need to
know.
unmute.
There we go.
Perfect.
Okay.
Hooray.
Oh,
Thank you.
yes, it's wonderful to be here. It's been a long time of greeting this wonderful group. And thank you for having me. After almost 3 years of safer at home and mostly listening and learning to write poetry, I got COVID. Going out to one poetry in public, all vaccinated, and I'm a little bit brain fog and a little bit fatigued. And this has been since the beginning of November. So this poem that I wrote in hopes for everyone to stay safe, I will read. Songs of the forest bards, voices of mankind, protectors, choirs under every steeple bell, gospels of the divine, prayers from A to Z across the globe, voices of womankind nurture, safely calculated, mathematically, scientifically. Everywhere the poet's voice shall make haste with dedication to defeat the pandemic beast. Beneath its final grave, erased for another 100 years, ending Earth's enduring loss of life. Maypoles ribboned in rainbows rejoice in gatherings of soul and spirit. Poets call in unison, reuniting families, ending Earth's enduring loneliness and separation. I shall ride a mighty gray to meet you by the sea. Mark my words, I'll meet you there. Kindly, Kate Clayre.
Thank you so much. I love the idea of a poetry community conquering COVID. I'm so sorry that you've had such illness with COVID, but I love your maypoles ribboned in rainbows. I hope we get there someday.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank
Blessings.
you. Next, we have, you know him, you know his chair, you know he's devastatingly good. He's DeWitt. DeWitt!
Okay, thank you. This is a short one for me called On Habit. Tolstoy asks why men stupefy themselves with tobacco, liquor, and habit. The still conscience, he argues. Hamlet lectures his middle-aged mom to refrain from sex. Practice to be good, and if you're not, abstain one night at a time. That monster custom, who all sense doth eat, of habit's devil, is angel yet in this. Use almost can change the stamp of nature. Richard Wilbur prays that nuns wear freshly laundered habits and keep their difficult balance. Good vies with bad for spiritual health and for physical. Use it or lose it, fitness clubs proclaim. Addict yourself to exercise, routine. Others exhort us, lose ourselves to find ourselves. I meditate and read. I fight the dull noise of dailiness to concentrate, to find right words. Keep ready in my chair. Come.
Did he freeze at a vital moment, or is this just me? He mentions his chair and then
You may need to read that a little bit.
We missed the very end bit after your chair. Just read the last couple of lines.
Okay. Others exhort us lose ourselves to find ourselves. I meditate and read. I fight to dull the noise of dailiness, to concentrate, to find right words. Keep ready in my chair, even when none come.
Perfect. Oh, I love the chair reference, but I do love the Hamlet lecturing to his mother to abstain from having sex. So always brilliant intertext, always taking me back to my library for more. Thank you, DeWitt. John Womback Wessick. He's always got something pretty special for us in a style that only John can write and entertain us with. So John, you're up.
Okay, so I'll just read the opening to a story called Benigno Fights the Bear, and I posted the link to the rest of it so you can read the rest if you want to. The window fan blew 90-degree air around the basement gym. Despite the heat, Benigno Rivera was glad to practice judo every afternoon at the university club. His opponent, Jim Cooper, was a big guy whose uniform smelled like gorgonzola, leaving a sweaty, unwashed judo gi to ferment in a locker for a week was lousy discipline. Why couldn't students wash them? Even after taking a shower, Benigno's hands would stink of the big guy's sweat. Cooper moved in for a hip throw. Benigno blocked it with a tai sabaki, stepped around and executed a hip throw of his own. He landed on top of Cooper and moved into a scarf hold called kesagatami. The big man tapped out. I'm going to take a break. Cooper did a standing bow. How are you going to compete with Wisconsin State if you don't train? Benigno asked. Cooper walked away, so Benigno sat cross-legged at the edge of the mat, the back of his sweaty gi sticking to the concrete wall. He turned his attention from the rondor to his broken toe buddy taped to its neighbor. The sticky wrestling mats were murder on bare feet. Canvas or tatami would have been better, but the judo club was lucky to have this space at all. Benigno had no worthy opponents here. Don Levine used to have a killer Uchimata, but he'd lost his fire after knee surgery. With no one to replace Levine, Benigno couldn't see how they'd make it to the Nationals. The instructor, Arto Virtanen, a graduate student in Eastern European languages, clapped his hands to end class. The students knelt facing the teacher and bowed out. Ever seen one of those wrestling bears at the county fair? Cooper asked Virtanen after class. How could judo win against an opponent like that? I know. Benigno jumped to his feet. When the bear rises up on his hind legs, I'd turn into a shoulder throw just as he comes down on top of me. Benigno dropped to his knees and demonstrated a seonagi. Yeah, fight the bear! Fight the bear! No one else chanted, so Benigno jumped up and down in front of Levine while shouting, Fight the bear! Fight the bear! A few others joined the chant. Virtanen shook his head and bowed out. And like I said, you can read the rest of it online. The link is in the chat. Thanks, everybody.
Love it. Totally going to go to the link straight away after this and read it. But I also want you to narrate my life because I think it's going to be far more interesting. And I love all the voices you do. So yeah, come along. It'll be great. Thank you, John. Cindy is next. She has a book out. It's fabulous. She is badass. And in addition to being badass, she's alliterative the last few weeks, and she may well be again. Cindy.
No.
Oh, she's going to break the mold.
Because today is a good day for a shameless plug. So, my book is called Telling You Everything. And, well, I didn't tell you everything. You know, I can't do that. My mother's going to read this. So I'm going to put the Amazon link in the chat. And I'm going to read what I thought of as a surrealistic poem, since we're doing some surrealism today. And Survision magazine, which I found out about through Lit Balm, published it. So I guess it is surrealistic, because that's what they think. And I've read it before here, so close your ears if you've, heard it. It's called Nueve Preguntas. I don't know why the title's in Spanish. I have no idea. But it means 9 questions. And the number 9 refers to the 9 circles of hell in Dante's Inferno, even though I never the hell read it. Nueve Preguntas. When did I stop leaping through scorched earth wildfires and blistering infernos? Why did God put a curse upon my right breast? Why did I think that gold rings and matrimony was a capital idea? When did I learn that love does not conquer all? It doesn't even conquer half. When did tubs of chubby hubby ice cream become my go-to dinner? When did I fall from that flimsy tightrope of my own making? When did my flaxen hair turn to sullen streaks of gunmetal gray? When did you turn from corporeal skin to utter dust? When did I, oh, sweet Jesus, grow a tail? Thank you.
Hooray! That was hella good, Cindy. Loved it. Loved it. Always love you reading. She's the unofficial Brooklyn Poet Laureate. And we have Bob, and we're so glad to have him back because I did a very poor interpretation of him last week and I wasn't even in a kitchen. But Bob, you're back. You're here to give us a final word on Lit Balm. I always love having this kind of moment with you when Lit Balm is about to finish and you give me something to think about for the rest of the day. What you got?
Thank you. This is something from my book, The House of Grand Farewells.
Brilliant.
Drift. Oaken infants satiate the forest fluctuations and scourge the picnics of recrimination. The orchards are insane with nipples and shuttle memory and irony into the sleepy warpath. The obvious monsoon is the spectral galleon that cries molten kitchen. It stoppers the penguin and spurns prodigious malady. Its igloo is the dissolving iguana, the one that persuades the nobleman with its rejection.
Oh, it was so worth the wait. You even managed to reference the kitchen in there. Apart from the fact that I can't stop getting nipples and orchards out of my head now. It was perfect. Thank you, Bob. It's so good to have you back. We missed you last week.
Thank you.
Your
Thank you
computer
so much.
woes are at an end. And back to you, Mark. It's been a pretty fabulous open mic.
Absolutely, it has, and it's been an amazing feature as well. And I'm so grateful again to Cole, Sarah, Garrett, Clayre, and John. And I just would like to remind you that next week we have the Dean Costas Memorial Show. Dean passed away very suddenly a few weeks ago, but there will be readings of Dean's work by Elena Cui, Jerome Sala, Patricia Spears-Jones, Rachel Haddis, Alfred Korn, Trace Peterson, Sharon Mesmer, Bonnie Walker, Karen Newberg, Isla Guzman, Panos Bonakis, Kimi Ramirez, Ron Cole, Molly Peacock, Todd Tillerman, Thaddeus Rutkowski, Alice Lacey, and Larissa Schmeilo. So please do join us for that. Dean was an amazing poet. I was very glad to have published 2 of his books. And to close, a little poem of mine, very short one, 8 lines, called Stay Near the Cloud. See if you can do this. The sun prefers anonymous partners. Go for the lightning or the sublime redness. Plants that tend themselves and swell. Thank you, everybody, for a wonderful reading. Have a great rest of your weekend, and Hope to see you soon. Lots of love and poetry. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So wonderful to hear everyone.
Thank you, Cole.
Great.
Thank you.
See ya.